What if I told you one of the most dominant players in the NFL just gave up millions of dollars, right when he might be planning his exit? Sounds backwards, right? Because that's exactly what's unfolding with Myles Garrett, and the deeper you look, the less this move makes sense on the surface, and the more calculated it starts to feel. At first glance, the story being pushed is simple. A superstar sacrifices money to help his team win. It's the kind of narrative fans love. Loyalty, leadership, commitment. The idea that a franchise cornerstone is willing to put everything on the line just to build something bigger than himself. But here, the problem. That's not the full story. Because while headlines are celebrating this as a selfless act, insiders around the league are quietly pointing out something very different. The timing, the structure, and the specific changes to his contract don't just help the team, they create options. Big ones. And not just for the Cleveland Browns, but for Garrett himself. Now think about this for a second. This isn't just any player. This is the face of the franchise, a defensive player of the year, a guy who has all the leverage in the world. If anyone in the league could sit back, collect every dollar, and never make a single concession, it's him. So why now? Why restructure a deal in a way that gives the team flexibility, but also quietly opens the door for a possible exit before the 2026 season? That's where things start to get interesting. Because at the same time all of this is happening, there's another storyline building in Cleveland. A young quarterback drawing massive attention. A name that's already generating headlines, buzz, and serious expectations. ShedeurSanders. And suddenly, these two stories are colliding. On one side, you have a veteran superstar making what looks like a sacrifice to help the team win now. On the other, you have a franchise that might be quietly positioning itself for a completely different future. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. So the question becomes impossible to ignore. Is this really about loyalty? Or is this a perfectly timed move that sets up both sides, the player and the organization, for something much bigger down the line? Because if you follow the money, the structure, and the timing closely enough, you start to realize this isn't just a contract adjustment. It might be the first move in a plan nobody saw coming. And what happens next could change everything in Cleveland. It didn't start with a press conference, no dramatic announcement, no big headline at first. Just a quiet update that quickly turned into one of the most talked about moves in the league. Myles Garrett had restructured his contract. And at first, it sounded routine. Teams do this all the time. Shift some money around, create a little cap space, move on. Nothing crazy. But this wasn't that. Because when the details started coming out, people around the league realized this wasn't just a minor adjustment. This was a major shift. Garrett didn't just tweak a few numbers. He completely reshaped parts of his deal. Money was moved. Deadlines were pushed back. Cap space suddenly opened up in a way that gave the Cleveland Browns real flexibility heading into a critical stretch. And here what made it shocking. He didn't have to do any of it. This is a player at the absolute top of the league, a defensive anchor, a game wrecker. The kind of guy offenses literally build entire game plans around avoiding. Players like that don't usually volunteer to give up financial security. They don't step in and say, "Take some of my guaranteed money and use it elsewhere." But that's exactly what this looked like. Suddenly, Cleveland had room to operate, room to chase free agents, room to make aggressive moves, room to build around a roster that many critics had already written off as incomplete. And just like that, the narrative flipped. Instead of questions about whether the Browns had enough talent, people started asking who they might go after next, what pieces they could add, how dangerous this team could actually become if they used that new flexibility the right way. On the surface, it felt like the ultimate leadership move. A superstar stepping up, sacrificing for the greater good, sending a message to the locker room that winning matters more than money. And make no mistake, that message was loud. Teammates noticed that kind of move. Coaches notice it. Even players around the league start paying attention when someone of Garrett's caliber makes a decision like this. It changes how people view an organization. It signals that something serious might be building behind the scenes. But here, where things take a turn. Because the more people looked at the structure of this deal, the more questions started popping up. Yes, it created cap space. Yes, it helped the team. But it also did something else, something far less obvious at first glance. It introduced flexibility, not just for the Browns, but for Garrett himself. And that's when the conversation shifted from, "This is a great team-first move," to, "Wait, what's really going on here?" Because when a player this powerful makes a move this unusual, it's rarely just about the surface-level story. And what started as a feel-good moment was quickly turning into something much bigger. But once you move past the headlines, that's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because buried inside this restructure, something most fans would never even notice, are details that completely change how this move should be viewed. We're talking about timing. We're talking about control. And most importantly, we're talking about flexibility that didn't exist before. When Myles Garrett adjusted his deal, one of the biggest changes wasn't just about money. It was about when decisions now have to be made. Reports suggest that key option bonuses tied to the 2026, 2027, and even 2028 seasons were pushed back. Not removed, just delayed. That might sound small. It's not. Because in the NFL, timing is everything. When those financial triggers hit can completely dictate whether a player stays, gets moved, or becomes part of a bigger plan. And now, those decisions happen much later, right before the season, which means the Cleveland Browns suddenly have something they didn't have before, time to evaluate, adjust, and, if needed, pivot. But here, where it gets even more interesting, that same flexibility works both ways. Because while it gives the Browns room to build, it also quietly gives Garrett something incredibly valuable, an exit window that's far cleaner than it used to be. Now, to be clear, nothing has been officially confirmed about him leaving. There's no announcement, no statement, no guarantee of anything happening. But insiders around the league have pointed out that moves like this often aren't random. They're strategic. They're calculated. And they usually happen when both sides want to keep options open. In other words, this could be preparation. Preparation for a scenario where, if things don't go exactly as planned, both the player and the organization can move on without everything collapsing. And that changes the entire tone of this story. Because suddenly, this isn't just about a superstar helping his team win. It's about a superstar making sure he has control over what happens next. And that raises a question nobody in Cleveland really wants to ask out loud. What if this isn't just about building for the future, but quietly protecting against it? Think about it. If the season doesn't go the way they expect, if the roster upgrades don't hit, if the offense still struggles, the Browns now have the flexibility to make a major move. And Garrett, he has a path that doesn't trap him long-term. Again, this is where speculation starts to creep in. Nothing is guaranteed, nothing is official. But the structure tells a story where both sides are keeping doors open. A story where commitment exists, but so does caution. And once you see that layer of it, it becomes impossible to look at this move the same way again. Because what looked like pure loyalty on the surface might actually be one of the smartest long-term plays happening behind the scenes. And this is exactly where the entire situation takes a turn, because now you have to bring ShedeurSanders into the picture. Because without him, this move looks like a smart financial decision. With him, it starts to look like something much bigger. Shedeur isn't just another young quarterback trying to find his place. He came into the league with attention already locked on him, huge college buzz, massive social media presence, and a level of confidence that instantly puts pressure on any organization he joins. Whether you believe the hype or not, one thing is clear. He brings eyes, expectations, and energy. And for the Cleveland Browns, that changes everything. Because now, this isn't just about building a competitive roster. It's about building the right environment for a quarterback who could define the next era of the franchise. That's why Myles Garrett's decision hits differently when you look at it through this lens. On the surface, he freed up cap space. Simple. But in reality, he may have just made it possible for Cleveland to accelerate everything around Shedeur. More money means more weapons, better protection, stronger depth, real options in free agency. Suddenly, all those concerns people had about the offense, not enough receivers, questionable line, lack of firepower, those problems now have solutions. And Garrett didn't just talk about leadership. He created opportunity. That's what makes this so impactful. Because young quarterbacks don't fail in a vacuum, they fail when the situation around them isn't built to support them. Bad protection, no separation from receivers, inconsistent play calling, it all adds up fast. And before you know it, a talented player looks average. But this move, it directly attacks that problem before it even begins. Now here, where things get even more interesting. There's been a lot of buzz online about Shedeur's role in Cleveland's long-term plans. Some reports claim the organization sees him as more than just a short-term option. Others suggest they're still evaluating, still deciding how far they want to go with him. Nothing is confirmed, but the conversation is there. And that uncertainty is exactly why this moment matters so much. Because Garrett's move doesn't just support Shedeur. It puts pressure on the organization to fully commit. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. You don't create this kind of flexibility, shift contracts like this, and open these kinds of doors just to hesitate. This is the type of move that says, we're building something now. And if Shedeur steps into that environment and delivers, everything changes overnight. The narrative flips, the franchise direction locks in, and suddenly Cleveland isn't searching for a quarterback anymore, they've found one. But if he does, that's where the other side of this story starts to show itself. Because remember, that flexibility we talked about earlier, it's still there. And that means while this move helps Shedeur, it doesn't guarantee anything. Which raises the real question no one can ignore now. Is this the beginning of a long-term partnership? Or just the setup for something else entirely? And this is where the conversation shifts from what's happening now to what might already be in motion behind the scenes. Because once you factor in the timeline, the flexibility, and everything surrounding Myles Garrett's deal, a much bigger picture starts to form. One that doesn't just focus on 2026, but looks straight at 2027. Now, let's be clear, nothing about this is officially confirmed. No team is going to come out and say they're planning years ahead in this kind of detail. But around the league, there's been quiet speculation, and it centers on one idea. What if this isn't just a win-now move? What if it's also a setup? Because if Garrett does end up leaving down the line, whether that's through a trade, a strategic exit, or something else entirely, the return could be massive. We're talking about a player of elite value. The kind of move that, according to some reports and speculation, could bring back multiple high-value picks. Possibly even first-rounders. And that's where 2027 starts to matter. There's been a growing belief in scouting circles that the 2027 draft class could be loaded at the quarterback position. Again, nothing guaranteed, but the early buzz is there. And teams that position themselves early, they're the ones that control the board. Now think about how that connects to the Cleveland Browns. If they're building around ShedeurSanders right now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're locking themselves into one path forever. It means they're giving themselves options. Because in the NFL, the smartest organizations don't just commit. They prepare for every outcome. If Shedeur develops into a star, then everything we're seeing right now pays off. The cap space, The roster building, the support system, it all aligns perfectly. But if things don't fully click, if there are questions, inconsistencies, or even just uncertainty, then suddenly, having extra first-round picks in a quarterback-heavy draft becomes one of the most powerful positions a team can be in. And this is where that dual-path idea starts to make sense. On one side, you go all in on developing your current quarterback. On the other, you quietly build the ability to pivot if needed. No panic, no desperation, just control. That's what makes this potential strategy so dangerous. Because it means Cleveland doesn't have to tank. They don't have to bottom out or sacrifice seasons just to reset. They can compete now, while still setting themselves up for a major move later. And Garrett's restructure. It fits right into that timeline. It creates flexibility in the present while keeping future decisions open. It allows the front office to build aggressively now, but without locking themselves into a situation they can't escape later. Again, this is where speculation comes into play. Nothing here is guaranteed. Plans change fast in the NFL. But the structure, the timing, the alignment of all these pieces, it doesn't feel random. It feels intentional. And if this really is the strategy, then Cleveland isn't just thinking one season ahead. They're playing a completely different game. A long game. And if they execute it right, they might end up controlling the future of the entire franchise in a way most teams never do. And if there's one person quietly sitting at the center of all of this, it's Andrew Berry. Because while fans focus on players, highlights, and headlines, the real power moves are happening behind closed doors. And Berry has been pulling strings that most people don't even notice until it's too late. This isn't just about managing a roster. It's about controlling an entire system. Berry has built a reputation across the league for something very specific, understanding the salary cap at a level most executives simply don't. While others react to problems, he tends to create flexibility before problems even exist. And this situation with Myles Garrett, it fits that pattern perfectly. Because getting a player of Garrett's caliber to agree to a restructure like this doesn't happen by accident. You don't just walk into a room, throw numbers on a table, and expect a superstar to give up security for no reason. That takes trust. Real trust. The kind built over years of consistent decisions, clear communication, and a track record that proves one thing: this front office knows what it's doing. And Garrett buying into this move tells you everything you need to know about how Berry is viewed internally. But here, where it gets even more interesting. Because Berry isn't just creating cap space for the sake of it. He's creating options. Options in free agency, options in trades, options in the draft, options that allow the Cleveland Browns to move in multiple directions depending on how things unfold. And that's what separates average front offices from dangerous ones. Average teams commit early and get stuck. Smart teams wait, gather flexibility, and strike when the opportunity is perfect. Right now, Cleveland is sitting in that second category. Because thanks to this restructure, Berry now has the ability to do something most teams can't: adjust in real time. If the draft board falls the wrong way, he can pivot. If a star player suddenly becomes available, he has the room to make a move. If the offense needs immediate help around ShedeurSanders, he can go get it. And that kind of control is rare. But it also comes with pressure. Because when you have this much flexibility, there are no excuses. Every decision matters more. Every move is amplified. And one mistake, it doesn't just hurt, it can undo everything you've been building. That's the risk nobody talks about. Berry has positioned the Browns to be aggressive, to be strategic, to be unpredictable. But now he has to deliver. Because creating opportunity is one thing. Executing on it, that's where legacies are made or broken. And the wild part is, we might not even know the full plan yet. Because the best front offices don't reveal everything at once. They layer moves. They build step by step. They stay quiet while everyone else is guessing. So while the league is busy reacting to Garrett's restructure, Barry might already be 3 steps ahead, setting up the next move, and the one after that, which raises one final thought. If this really is a master plan, then what we've seen so far might only be the beginning. What happens inside the locker room after a move like this is something fans almost never get to see. But it might be the most important part of the entire story. Because when a player like Myles Garrett, the face of the franchise, the leader of the defense, the guy everyone looks to, makes a decision to restructure his deal and give the team more flexibility, it doesn't just stay on paper. It sends a message. And not a quiet one. It tells every single person in that building something very clear. This isn't about me. Now think about how rare that is. In a league where contracts define careers, where players fight for every dollar, where leverage is everything, you don't often see a superstar willingly shift the balance in favor of the team. That's why this hits differently. Because it instantly changes the tone inside the Cleveland Browns locker room. Veterans notice it. Young players definitely notice it. And most importantly, the quarterback notices it. For ShedeurSanders, this isn't just a headline or a business move, it's a signal. A signal that the best player on the team is willing to invest in the bigger picture, and, indirectly, in him. And that kind of belief does something powerful. It removes doubt. It builds confidence before a single snap is played. Because when you walk into a situation knowing that the organization and the leaders within it are fully committed to building around success, you don't hesitate the same way. You don't second-guess every throw. You don't feel like you have to carry everything alone. You play freer. You play faster. You play like you belong. And that's where the psychological edge starts to form. Because now it's not just about talent or schemes or play calling. It's about belief. But here, the flip side that makes this even more intense. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. Moves like this don't just create confidence. They create pressure. Because when a superstar sacrifices for the team, it raises the standard for everyone else. Now it's not enough to just show up. Now it's not enough to be good. Because if Garrett is willing to adjust his contract to make this work, what excuse does anyone else have? That's how cultures shift. Not through speeches, not through slogans. Through actions. And suddenly, every practice rep matters more. Every mistake stands out more. Every player feels the weight of what's being built. Free agents see it too. Around the league, players pay attention to this kind of move. They notice when a team's top player buys in like this. It signals stability. It signals seriousness. It signals that something real might be forming in Cleveland. And that can change decisions in ways fans never even realize. But here's the part that makes it all so fragile. Belief only lasts if results follow. If the team wins, this moment becomes the foundation of something special. If they do, it turns into a question mark. A what went wrong story. Because now the expectations are higher than ever. The message has been sent. The tone has been set. And the locker room is fully aware of what's at stake. Which means one thing. This isn't just a feel-good moment anymore. It's a turning point. And what happens next will decide whether this becomes a legendary culture shift. Or just another, what could have been in Cleveland. But for all the excitement, all the headlines, all the talk about leadership and sacrifice, there's a side of this story that almost nobody wants to touch. The risk. Because what looks like a power move right now could turn into a massive problem if even a few things go wrong. Start with the most obvious issue. The roster still isn't complete. Yes, Myles Garrett created flexibility. Yes, the Cleveland Browns now have more room to operate. But cap space doesn't win games. Players do. And that's where the uncertainty creeps in. This upcoming draft class, it's not as clean as people hoped. There's no guarantee that a true game-changing offensive weapon falls into their lap. Some prospects come with injury concerns. Others don't perfectly fit what the team needs. It's not one of those years where you can just pick and instantly fix a problem. Which means the margin for error just got razor thin. Because now, every move carries more weight. If they miss on a draft pick, it hurts more. If a free agent signing doesn't pan out, it costs more. If they fail to properly build around ShedeurSanders, the entire plan starts to wobble. And that's the part people are overlooking. Because this move didn't just give Cleveland opportunity. It raised expectations. And expectations can crush teams just as fast as they elevate them. Think about the pressure now placed on the front office, on Andrew Barry, on the coaching staff, on every decision that gets made from this point forward. There's no more hiding. No more waiting. They've been given the tools. Now they have to deliver. And if they do, this entire situation flips. Because suddenly, Garrett's sacrifice doesn't look like leadership anymore. It looks like a missed opportunity. Worse, it starts raising questions. Why make this move if the team wasn't ready? Why open this window if you couldn't capitalize on it? And here, where it gets even more dangerous. That flexibility we've talked about, the same flexibility that makes this move so powerful, also makes it easier to walk away if things fail. If the roster doesn't improve. If the offense struggles. If Shedeur doesn't take the leap people expect. Then all those open doors. They don't just help the team. They make it easier for major changes to happen. Big ones. The kind that reset everything. And that's not speculation. That's just how the league works. Teams build fast. But they can pivot even faster. So while fans are celebrating this as a bold step forward, there's a very real scenario where this becomes the beginning of something else entirely. A transition. A quiet shift in direction. Because when you push your chips to the middle like this, you're not just betting on success. You're accepting the consequences if it doesn't happen. And right now, Cleveland is walking that line. Between building something dangerous and risking everything if it falls apart. Which makes one thing crystal clear. This isn't just a big moment. It's a high-stakes gamble. So when you step back and look at everything together, this story isn't as simple as it first seemed. What started as a headline about Myles Garrett restructuring his contract has turned into something far more layered. Because yes, on the surface it looks like loyalty. A superstar giving up millions to help the Cleveland Browns compete. A leader stepping up. A franchise cornerstone doing what most players wouldn't even consider. But once you connect all the dots, the timing, the flexibility, the structure, the future implications, it starts to feel less like a simple sacrifice and more like a calculated move with multiple outcomes built into it. And that's what makes this so fascinating. Because right now, Cleveland is standing at a crossroads. On one side, there's the path everyone wants to believe in. This move sparks a transformation. The front office capitalizes on the cap space. The roster improves. ShedeurSanders steps into the spotlight and delivers. Everything clicks, and the Browns suddenly become one of the most dangerous teams in the league. That's the dream. That's the version of the story fans are holding on to. But there's another side. A quieter one. One where this move isn't just about building forward. It's about staying prepared in case things don't go as planned. A scenario where flexibility matters more than commitment. Where keeping options open becomes just as important as chasing immediate success. And if that's the case, then this wasn't just a team-first decision. It was a strategic one. A move that protects both the organization and the player no matter what direction things go. Because in today's NFL, the smartest teams don't just chase wins. They manage risk. They create leverage. They make sure that no matter what happens, they're never stuck. And right now, that's exactly what this feels like. A franchise trying to do both at once, win now, and stay ready for what's next. Which brings everything back to one final question. What is this really? Is this the moment the Browns officially go all in and build something special around a new era? Or is this the first step in a longer plan, one that could look completely different just a year or two from now? Because the truth is, we won't know right away. It's going to play out over time. Through draft picks, through roster moves, through wins and losses. But one thing is certain. This wasn't just a routine contract change. It was a signal, a shift, a moment that could define the future of this team in ways most people don't fully see yet. And if everything breaks the right way, the league might not be ready for what Cleveland is about to become. But if it does, this could turn into one of the most talked about what-if stories we've seen in a long time.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.